Leader Roy Blunt, who's been leading their negotiations on their behalf. And one of the lawmakers who's going to have to make a decision is our next guest, Congressman Scott Garrett, Republican from New Jersey. He's a member of the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, based on the way the deal has been described to you, is this something that you and your colleagues, the House Republicans, can support?
As the way it's described to us right now, realizing that we do have a problem on Wall Street, realizing that that problem on Wall Street will impact Main Street, I would still not be able to support it as it's structured now, because the American taxpayer is still being put on the hook, and there are other alternatives out there.
Well, those other alternatives include that insurance provision, which is going to be an option for the Treasury Department. But are you suggesting that as long as it's just an option and it's not mandatory, that's what's keeping you from supporting this bill? Yeah,
there's the optimal word in your description of it. If it's optional, or even if you try to massage it in some way with some little parameters, which are probably impossible to write, the Treasury Secretary has already told us from day one, or Wednesday when he came to our committee, that he's looked at this and he rejects that he supports his proposal. So if you put a bill in place that puts into a law in place that says, Treasury Secretary, choose what you wish, well, he's going to go with what he's already thought is the appropriate way, which is $700 billion of taxpayer dollars. Even if that's spent out over time, that makes no real difference. It's still the money on the back of the taxpayer.
Congressman, a big question for you, and that is when Congressman Blunt meets with all of you in the caucus and says, look, this is the best deal that we could have gotten under these circumstances. It's far from perfect. It may be an imperfect bill, but this is what we've got, and I want you all to support it. Clearly, you've made your opposition clear.
Right.
How many of your colleagues do you think will share your view? How many of them in the House Republican caucus will say, you know what, we need to support this because Wall Street needs it?
Well, there's 2 points here. One is, of course, is that at the end of the day, the Democrats control the House, and if they want to put forward a bill that they support, that Speaker Pelosi supports, she can put it forward in an hour from now and put her Democrats' votes on it and pass it, and we can be out of here. But if they're looking for Republican votes right now, well, I'll just tell you this. Last night I was on the floor of the House, and I cautioned the American public that they should be concerned about what may come out. Now, this morning I went on to do it at 1 minute, and I said they should be alarmed that Washington is not hearing from the American public, that Washington is not hearing what they're saying, that we should stand up and stand firm, as the House Republicans have in the past, and say this is the way to do it. We want these other options to put on the table, and if the Democrats aren't going to listen, then the Democrats are going to be responsible for putting through their plan.
When you express those sentiments to Congressman Blunt, your Republican colleague, what is his reaction?
Well, I've yet to see the Congressman Blunt yet this morning. They have just gone into a leadership meeting literally almost as we speak. We'll be having a conference on this in a short time. I'll be making those comments, and I bet you a lot of my colleagues are going to make those similar comments as well.
Congressman, if there was one thing that would change your mind as far as details in the language, the legislative language in this, what would it be?
Well, to jettison the overall idea that the Secretary has come up with, is saying we're going to buy up these assets and instead go to a plan that the assets are actually held by the entities that has them around with a backstop of some sort. Imagine, for example, what will happen if the Treasury Secretary gets what he wants. You'll have this huge responsibility of the federal government to be managing all these homes all across the country. It's
right, but won't Congress have legislative oversight over that?
We have oversight. We'll be able to say how you're doing it in this extent or that extent. That's pretty limited. But at the end of the day, you're still talking about the federal government picking up $700 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities. A lot of these are bad. A lot of these were foreclosed. They will fall into the hands of the Treasury Department. They will then be responsible for handling it. I'll just give you one example of what I mean by this. One of my colleagues made this comment. He said, if this goes through, the first phone call we're going to get is out there from a constituent who says, my house is about to be foreclosed on. You, the federal government, owns it. Stop it. The second phone call we're going to get is a phone call from someone in that town saying, the house next door to me is owned by the federal government now, and there's crack dealers in it and something like that. The federal government's not managing it. You got to take care of it.
But Congressman, what about the phone call you'll get from somebody who's in charge of a small business who says, you know what, I can't meet my payroll now because the credit has tightened and I can't borrow the money under the same rates that I did before because this crisis continues?
Exactly. That's why I go back to my very first statement. We realize that problem is out there. We need to do something about it. We need to do it now, but we need to do it in a way with the various options that have been laid out here that will not, A, put the taxpayers on the hook, and B, not cause short-term problems as far as the management, and 3, an idea that we haven't talked about at all, long-term, the impact of inflation on the economy, and that small business might be looking at things today, but if the inflation goes through the roof when you have that $700 billion worth of borrowing and indebtedness, that's the cruelest tax of all on that small business.
Congressman Scott Garrett, Republican from New Jersey, who just demonstrated one of the key political challenges this afternoon is that there are going to be many, for some very valid reasons, many lawmakers who are going to say no, they don't want to support this. And the question is going to be, at what point will the Democratic leadership in the Bush administration say, you know what, we've got enough support, we're going to pass it anyway? Will Speaker